it could be a huge change come this summer. I don't know if it'll happen, but kind of in the talk is the scholarships could change this summer. I mean, there's a lot of talk of having some discussion and making it legal by August 1st of coaching numbers changing. You know, we've said here before that volunteer coach would be kind of gone. You could pay whatever your conference wants to decide. So you could start seeing that change. And baseball scholarships, there's a lot of talk that people think there might be you could do 35, not 35 scholarships, but have 35 guys on scholarship and whatever your conference and school feels they could do. Where right now, I would be so happy in my life not to say two terms again, 11.7, which is the dumbest, I hate it, and volunteer coach. Let me tell you, from a guy that's been called a volunteer coach, there ain't one damn thing volunteer about it. You're there every day. You're there 7 days a week. There ain't one thing volunteer, and they're not holding a gun to you to be there now. But at the same time, to use that term is so, and I said it to Coach Tanner, probably one of the most insulting things I've ever been called. And I know that goes for other guys that are still called volunteer coaches. Come on. I feel like we should have our socks pulled up and a pair of those coaching shorts on when you say that term. So I say that all in preface to my answer is I think you have to get a blend. I agree. Monty's got a ton of South Carolina guys on his roster. I still think you got to make sure you have a blend of those guys from, all over. I mean, we'll not forget Jackie Bradley was from Virginia. Christian Walker was from Pennsylvania. I mean, there are guys that have been spattered into this program forever. Obviously Florida JUCO was a mainstay, but we were also very big in California. I remember Nate Janowitz on a 2000 team. You start naming guys. We've had a ton of Ron Peters. Those guys were all California guys. So there's certainly nothing wrong with having other guys in the program. You just want to try to really make sure you get your best guys from the state on your roster, because then it really means something.
What's the sell that has allowed other programs? Is it, hey, we got shiny stuff too? Is it we think baseball's important now too?
Well, here's the thing that really changed, and I'm speaking 25 years. You could get a guy to come walk on and sit in our dugout until maybe his junior or senior year before he ever played. And he might not be getting any money, and that was still better than going to Coastal.
Brian Jeffcoat pops in my head. That sound about right to you?
Who's that?
Like Brian Jeffcoat.
Yes. Yeah, a guy like Brian Jeffcoat don't come to South Carolina right now. He'd be going to Coastal and helping them win a championship, or he'd be going to Wofford or College of Charleston. Those programs, I mean, it just back then you could get guys because they wanted to just be a part. Now they do want to play, and they see an opportunity to play, and they see now everyone's basically on TV. That used to be lure. I mean, I remember kids as I was recruiting back in the 90s would say, hey, are any of our games on TV? Yeah, because no one else was beside the SEC and maybe a few ACC. Now with ESPN Plus, I've watched USC Upstate play numerous games this year. I've watched College of Charleston play. All their games are on. Charleston Southern's on. I sat and watched them play PC the other weekend. So now it's equaled. A lot of stuff's caught back up, but that's the difference now. And you have to pay more. Where in the past, maybe you could have got a guy limits for $1,000 at South Carolina or books at South Carolina. Now they're going, well, hey, I can get $12,000 at Wofford. I'm not going, I'm going to go get that. So it's certainly changed, but it can still be the draw. And that's what I want it to still be.
So I was hoping you could, for those of us much less versed in it than you, the volunteer coach designation and the 11.7 scholarships that college baseball's had forever, if you can kind of break those down from us from your expert opinion. And then specifically, so they're talking about adjusting the rules, and this is all part of the larger discussion about NIL and transfer portal and the whole thing with the NCAA, I think, right now.
Yes.
But why don't we start volunteer coach, since that was your designation, your favorite designation. So we call you the volunteer Spider-Man here on the show, Spider Guy.
Yeah.
Well,
here's the hard part of it. Unless as a volunteer, you're not allowed to leave campus to recruit. So you could only do things on campus at your facility, camps, those type things.
So let me set it up to begin with how I understand it anyway. You got a head coach.
Yep.
and you got 2 full-time assistants, and that's it. Then
That's it.
you have to go volunteer coach designation, right?
Yes.
And that's for college baseball across the board.
Yeah. Now, when I moved back here in 2017, if you remember, I came back to be player development.
Right.
Well, player development per the NCAA can be a full-time employee.
Right.
So when I moved back up here, I was a full-time state employee, player development. You were paid. What I could not do as player development is I could not have coaching conversations with players. So I couldn't walk up to, whoever at that point, let's say Jonah Bride, and talk to him about a grip or a stance. All I could talk to him about at that time, my eyes are rolling too, was we could go over scouting reports, or he could ask me a question about, his classroom. So it was that position still exists. Mike Current's in that position now. The volunteer, when I came back, was Brian Busher. He could do everything except get paid, which is pretty important. He could not get any insurance from the school. He could not get any benefits. So, it was limited. He couldn't get free basketball tickets or football tickets. It's one of the craziest rules that it's driven me crazy, because you got to realize I was a volunteer in 1998. I did it for those years. When I left from 2002 to 2017, I was a quote full-time assistant or head coach, and it's just ridiculous, because you could do everything as a volunteer except get paid, have insurance. You can't leave campus to recruit, and you can't make certain contact as far as initiating phone calls, those type things that you could do. So what they're wanting to do is just do away with all that. And it would be where the SEC could decide you can have 4 paid assistants, or the ACC may decide, you know what, you can only have 3. It's going to be up to conferences, I feel, to decide what you want to do with how you pay.
I've seen this conversation also expand over to football, right? If Alabama wants to have 47 assistant coaches on Nick Saban's staff, and go do it, right? Look, the market kind of determines how you're going to spend your money. To me, it's a much more common sense approach. I get it. It's unregulated. I'm an unregulated guy. The name of the show is called Unrestricted Free Agent thing. So that was a great explanation of the volunteer coach. And as you were talking, it dawned on me, any idea why that was the way it was originally set up? And I'm assuming it's way back in the day, and I get it became antiquated really quick, but any idea why those were put into place? I guess for fairness, so the schools that actually did put some money into baseball weren't going to have too much of an unfair advantage. Was that the point, you think?
That was it. And gosh, even early in my career, sometimes you only had one paid assistant, and the other assistants were called GAs, or grad assistants. So they were getting their masters. Then it became 2 full-time assistants, and they did away with any graduate assistants. So that was another rule that blew my mind. So now you can't have a guy in graduate school and you're giving him any money to help him do it. He'd have to do it on his own. He'd have to pay on his own. The only way, and up until, gosh, Tim, maybe 10 years ago, the coach wasn't even legally allowed to pay the volunteer out of camp except for direct instruction he had provided in, say, the youth camp or hitter camp. So now they changed that rule, so a coach can decide to give you a percentage of his camp and you get a salary, or they can do whatever they want in that regard with their money. They were telling them what to do with their money. So it's been crazy. The 11.7 was the big Title IX issue that it's been 11.7. I can always remember my whole career. But it used to be you could spread that over whatever you wanted. It could be a kid on $500. It could be a guy on $15,000. And then I'm trying to think of the year. It was around 2010 maybe, when they said, no, you can only have 27 players on some form of scholarship. You can only have 35 total players on your rosters. And that's when a lot changed. And that's when a lot of things changed. That's what changed a lot when we look back to where did Coastal and where did Wofford and where did these play? Well, it became a lot more attractive because you couldn't have more than so many on your roster at South Carolina or Clemson. And I was at Charleston Southern at the time. I'll be honest with you, I took full advantage of that. I had some kids, Bobby Ison, who turned out to be a great player. I knew he probably would have been a walk-on at a South Carolina Clemson 5 years earlier and just tried to earn his keep. But those guys didn't want to do that, and they weren't sure they had a place even to do it. I mean, locker rooms only have 35 lockers in it because that's all you can have. Now with COVID, kind of went back a little. Hey, you can have a few extra because you got the 6-year guys, so now you can have a roster maybe of 40. But I'm all for it, and I'm from outside of just asking. I hammer Coach Tanner a lot, of course, but people all over the country think you're going to see this summer the coaching number change, and they feel you're going to see the scholarships, a drastic change happen maybe as early as August 1st this summer.
And net positive result kind of across the board for coaches, players, the health of the game. Did you see any negatives to that?
I can't. I sit, and I'm a pretty realistic person. I'm a guy that made being a volunteer work. So I've always been in a mindset of make it work. I can't find the negative in this. To me, what it's going to do is, and I'm sitting here talking a lot as a dad too, because I know how much my son wants to go on to play at some level of college baseball. I think it's going to open doors back to these guys that have been kind of closed. And I don't think the people that made the rules thought they were closing doors back when they were going 35 roster limit, 27 scholarship. I really don't think they thought they were. They thought they were making it equal. And in turn, they were hurting in our sport a lot of guys because, I mean, man, you could probably on one hand count the number of sports in college baseball, college athletics that have partial scholarships. I mean, it's baseball, softball. I'll be after that. I got to start trying to think who else has it. I mean, volleyball at South Carolina's full. I mean, everybody else has full scholarships, and kids are. So it's let's get rid of this, and let's get a little more modern in what we're doing for these kids. And then for coaches, I'm elated to think there's going to be more positions of more people. I know some of the best people that are out of baseball, and I'm one of them because financially it becomes so hard to try to keep figuring it out. I'm so excited what it could do for the future of coaching, and immediately, not in 3-4 years. I just mean immediately how many great people you'll get to see have an opportunity to get back in the game or get in the game. So I'm hoping that this is something that continues to move forward the way they're saying it is.
Would it only be the concern of small schools not being able to compete with the larger budgets? I mean, you were the head coach at Charleston Southern. You certainly have that experience. Well,
see, I never felt that Charleston Southern, that it was unfair for South Carolina or whoever, go get in those programs. And I used to say that. My AD would laugh at me, and eventually I did. I said, I'm not going to sit here and hold back, half of our sport for a half that ain't going to put money in either way. They weren't going to put money in. I mean, I was at Charleston Southern with 8 scholarships at one point. They weren't going 11.7 back then either way. Now they have, and that's why you see things happening so great. I had one paid assistant when I took that job in 2009. And I'm embarrassed to tell you what he was paid. And by the time I left, I had 2 full-time assistants. My volunteer there had to teach. I just told him, go be a teacher, make a real salary, come over here, we'll practice late. I'd fought to get lights. That was one of my reasons that I wanted to get lights. We could practice later instead of trying to practice at 1:30, 2 o'clock before it got dark. I could have quality volunteer coaches, and it turned out that I did. And so, no, I'm not one to hold back, a portion of college baseball because the other portion, they weren't going to spend the money anyway. So let's force them to do it. And I think they will. I think people are realizing you get to come on your campus now 30 sometimes a year with ESPN Plus. I mean, any kid can turn on a game now and see the campus of Charleston Southern or the campus of USC Upstate or College of Charleston. And yeah, they're not seeing the library, but you know what? They weren't worried about that to begin with. They're getting to see your facility. And if you got good announcers, they're telling things about your campus and your city, and it's a free 3-hour plus advertisement for your school. And most ADs have grasped that, and they want to win, and they want to have their name mentioned on these type shows.